Imagine finding out that the world's most sophisticated racing machines, vehicles representing the absolute pinnacle of aerodynamic
All
engineering.
right, the bleeding edge of material science.
Exactly. Imagine finding out they're being held together behind the scenes by, like, the exact same software you use to dread doing your taxes.
It is genuinely terrifying to think about.
It really is. Well, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are unpacking the dramatic internal crisis and the honestly, utterly desperate restructuring currently unfolding at the Williams Formula One team. And this is all happening right now in the early 2026 season.
Because we are looking at a fundamentally fascinating contradiction here. On one hand, you have an organization with a legendary motorsport pedigree.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, this is a team that practically defined the whole garage to glory racing mythology,
Right.
right? But on the other hand, you have an operation struggling to execute the most basic foundational aspects of building a physical car.
And we've compiled a massive stack of motorsport analyses, historical F1 data, and internal team statements to really get under the skin of this operation.
There is a lot to unpack.
There is. So our mission today is to map out exactly why this team is failing to build a competitive car. We're going to uncover the shocking internal systems holding them back and analyze the aggressive contingency plan they're executing right now to try and save the 2026 season.
Yeah, because the on-track performance, or, lack thereof, is really just a symptom. To understand the current crisis, you have to look past the pit wall.
Right, way past it.
Exactly, deep into the factory floor to examine the psychological and operational culture of the team itself.
So let's start right on the tarmac to establish the sheer scale of the problem the drivers are dealing with. I mean, the anatomy of their 2026 car, the FW48, it's just staggering.
It really is an engineering disaster.
Right. So it arrived late to the Barcelona preseason tests. It completely missed the shakedown, and when they finally rolled it onto the FIA scales, it weighed in at a massive 794 kilograms.
Which is just an unbelievable number in modern F1.
Yeah, because rivals are sitting at the target weight of 768 kilograms or lower. That means the FW48 is 26 kilos overweight.
Wow.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because racing an F1 car that is 26 kilos overweight is like an Olympic sprinter trying to run the 100-meter dash while wearing a heavy hiking backpack.
Like a 57-pound backpack.
Exactly. No matter how skilled the athlete is, the basic physics of the situation just won't let you win.
The physics are totally merciless here. Carrying an extra 26 kilograms drastically alters the dynamic profile of the car. You're carrying way more inertia into every single braking zone.
Which just cooks the brakes, right?
Oh, it spikes brake temperatures and aggressively degrades the tires.
Yeah.
And on acceleration, you are constantly fighting that extra mass. But, it's worse than just sluggish straight-line speed.
How so?
It compromises the center of gravity.
Huh?
Normally, teams use ballast to balance the chassis perfectly. But you can't distribute ballast where you need it if that extra weight is just permanently baked into the structural components of the car itself.
And the mechanical grip isn't even the wildest part. The car suffers from a severe lack of aerodynamic downforce. We've actually seen the FW48 physically lifting its rear wheel while taking high-speed corners.
Yeah, three-wheeling through a corner. It's crazy.
It's like trying to fly a fighter jet where the wings generate lift instead of pushing you down into the tarmac. The car is actively fighting its own aerodynamic design.
What's fascinating here is that this points to a total disconnect between their simulation tools and the physical reality.
Right, because the computer says it should stick to the track.
Exactly. When a car three-wheels through a corner, the suspension geometry is completely out of its operating window. This isn't just a minor aerodynamic oversight.
No.
It's the physical manifestation of an administrative nightmare back at the factory.
Yeah.
You don't accidentally design a car to be 26 kilos too heavy.
It has to be systemic.
Right. That weight is a glaring symptom of a deeply broken manufacturing pipeline. Designing an aerodynamically perfect car on a computer means absolutely nothing if your factory floor physically cannot build those lightweight, complex carbon fiber components on time and to specification.
And that structural failure back at Grove, that's the core of this entire crisis. Because if the problem is manufacturing, we really have to ask why a multi-million-dollar racing operation is failing at the absolute basics of building a car.
And the answer is pretty shocking.
It is. When James Vowles joined as team principal, he started auditing the internal processes. He shockingly discovered the team was managing the entire design and manufacturing pipeline of the Formula One car using a single Excel spreadsheet.
Yep. One spreadsheet.
Containing 20,000 cells.
Oh, wait.
So you're telling me a cutting-edge racing operation was using the exact same software I used to try and fail to budget my groceries?
It sounds like a joke, but it's completely true.
The idea that Williams is using it to track a multi-million-dollar supply chain is terrifying. It has to be an instant bottleneck.
Oh, it's the ultimate bottleneck. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is a textbook case of organizational inertia. To understand the sheer absurdity of it, just consider the life cycle of one single component, like a front wing end plate.
Okay, walk me through it.
Well, it starts as a digital mesh in CFD. Then it moves to CAD. From CAD, you need to machine physical molds from tooling block.
Right.
Then it goes to the clean room where laminators lay up pre-preg carbon fiber piece by piece before it finally goes into the autoclave to cure.
That's a lot of steps for just one piece.
Exactly. And a modern F1 car has roughly 80,000 bespoke components. If you are using a 20,000 cell spreadsheet, you aren't even tracking half the car at the nut and bolt level. You're tracking massive, clunky subassemblies.
Wow. And think about the downstream effects of that. If a designer updates the geometry of a part because it failed a stress test in simulation, but that Excel spreadsheet isn't dynamically linked to the inventory system.
Then the guys in the composite shop might use the old mold.
Exactly. You end up with physical parts that simply do not fit together when they reach the assembly base.
And that is the exact mechanism that creates a 26-kilo overweight car.
How so? Like, where does the actual weight come from?
Well, because the engineers know the tracking system is deeply flawed,
Right.
They know parts might not fit or might fail quality control, so they compensate by over-engineering everything.
To be safe.
Right. If you aren't confident in your dynamic tolerances, you just add an extra layer of carbon fiber. You use a heavier titanium fastener instead of a lightweight aluminum one.
You slap heavier resin patches on components just to guarantee they won't break on the track.
Exactly. You sacrifice performance for baseline reliability, and suddenly your car gains 57 pounds.
It's a system destined for catastrophic failure. But I just don't get it. How does a team survive that long operating on a system held together by digital duct tape? How do you mask that level of incompetence for over a decade?
You mask it with raw horsepower. Specifically, the legacy advantage of the dominant 2015 Mercedes power unit.
Oh, right, because they had the best engine on the grid by a mile back then.
Exactly. For years, the Mercedes engine was so far ahead of the pack in terms of pure output, it gave the team a completely false impression of their baseline aerodynamic and mechanical performance. It acted as a massive smokescreen.
But it's worse than just hiding the decay, though. That Mercedes engine actively disincentivized them from updating their processes.
Yes, 100%.
Like, if you are scoring points and standing on podiums because your engine is a rocket ship, the board isn't going to authorize a massive, painful structural overhaul of the IT and manufacturing departments.
Right, because on paper, everything looks fine. You become complacent, organizational inertia sets in, but you just can't outrun a broken system forever.
No, eventually the bill comes due.
And once the engine regulations stabilized and rivals caught up in horsepower, the underlying rot at Williams became undeniable. The timeline of their collapse is a textbook study in systemic failure.
Yeah, let's look at that timeline. Because by 2019, under Patty Lowe and Claire Williams, the decay really reached the surface. They completely missed the start of preseason testing.
Which is just unheard of for a modern team. The physical car simply wasn't ready to run.
And that 2019 crisis cost Patty Lowe his job. He actually admitted later that they had been coasting on those legacy advantages, and they've been trying and failing to fix those roots ever since.
It's just been a revolving door of attempted fixes.
Right. In 2022, Joss Capito came in to overhaul the pipeline. He had a brilliant pedigree from the World Rally Championship, but the car that year was terrible, and he was out.
And then we get to 2024.
Oh man, 2024. The pipeline failed so spectacularly that it became a global humiliation. They didn't even have a spare chassis in Australia.
That was brutal to watch.
It was. When Alex Albon crashed in free practice, they had to cannibalize teammate Logan Sargent's car, hand it to Albon, and essentially humiliate Sargent by sidelining him for the entire weekend.
I mean, imagine being a team competing at the absolute pinnacle of global motorsport, and you're literally incapable of manufacturing 3 tubs for a race weekend. It laid bare exactly what James Vowles inherited.
A culture fundamentally broken right down to the resin and carbon fiber.
Exactly.
So how does Vowles fix a 20,000 cell nightmare? Because he isn't just crossing his fingers at this point. He has initiated a massive contingency plan. He's bringing out both the scythe to fire underperformers and the wallet to hire aggressively.
And the crown jewel of this restructuring is Dan Milner. He was just announced as the new chief engineer of vehicle technology.
Milner is a heavy hitter.
Oh, absolutely. He spent 14 years at Mercedes. He was at Brackley since 2006, back during the Bar Honda and Braun GP days. He has 8 world titles under his belt and just finished his gardening leave to join Williams.
But Milner's mandate is incredibly specific, right? He isn't there to draw a faster front wing.
No, his job is to violently unblock that pipeline. He has to take the theoretical data from CAD, CFD, and the wind tunnel and force it smoothly into physical manufacturing.
So he's basically the IT and process guy.
Essentially, yes. He has to implement modern ERP enterprise resource planning systems. He has to be the bridge between the digital fantasy of a fast car and the physical reality of a carbon fiber layup.
And he will be working under Technical Director Matt Harmon and Executive Technical Director Pat Fry. But here's where it gets really interesting. We have to look at the Matt Harmon caveat.
Yeah, the optics here are not great.
They're terrible.
Yeah.
Matt Harmon was the technical director at Alpine in 2024. Alpine's 2024 car failed its crash tests, arrived late to production, and started the season massively overweight. Harmon resigned after the very first race.
Right.
Fast forward to 2026. Harmon is the technical director at Williams, and the FW48 is over 20 kilos overweight. So I have to ask, is Matt Harmon the common denominator for overweight cars, or is he just incredibly unlucky to inherit broken manufacturing pipelines at both Alpine and Williams?
That's a great point. It raises a vital question about accountability versus inherited disaster.
Right.
Like you said, the optics for Matt Harmon are undeniably brutal. The overlap of overweight, late cars under his technical directorship is striking. However, as we just mapped out with the 2019 preseason absence and the 2024 chassis disaster, the historical context proves something else.
That Williams has suffered from this exact systemic manufacturing failure long before Matt Harmon walked through the doors at Grove.
Exactly. He walked into a building that had been burning for a decade. He didn't like the match.
That's a fair point.
The real challenge now isn't pointing fingers at Harmon for a historical problem. The challenge is whether Dan Milner, coming from the highly functional, digitized, championship-winning culture of Mercedes, can integrate into the stubborn environment at Grove.
Because the shock for Milner will be cultural just as much as technical.
Right. Can he force a team to abandon their archaic workflows without paralyzing the entire factory in the short term?
It's a massive risk. And while management is frantically restructuring the factory, we really have to look at what is happening on the ground with the human element. The drivers are the ones strapped into this heavy, aerodynamically starved machine week after week.
And their reaction has been completely surprising.
Totally. Let's look at Carlos Sainz. He comes off a frustrating, essentially blank 2025 season after his exit from Ferrari. You'd expect him to be absolutely miserable.
Anyone would be.
Right. He signs a massive deal expecting a revival project, and instead he gets a car fighting for 15th place. You'd assume he'd treat this year as a total write-off, but the paddock sources are reporting the exact opposite.
It's true. The phrase circulating the paddock to describe Sainz right now is enchufadísimo, meaning he is completely plugged in.
I love that word, enchufadísimo.
It fits perfectly.
Yeah.
He is spending virtually 20/47 at the factory. He isn't acting like a hired gun who's just there to drive. He is operating like a senior engineer and a team builder.
So, what does this all mean for you as a fan? It means Sainz isn't just the pilot complaining about the turbulence. He's down in the trenches. He's talking to the aero department, the vehicle dynamics team, trying to build morale, diagnosing problems at the root.
He's down in the engine room with a wrench, trying to patch the hull while the ship is actively sinking.
Yes. He's literally putting the team on his back, a phenomenon people are already calling the Sainz effect.
Because Sainz understands that sulking won't digitally remove 26 kilos from a CAD file.
Exactly.
He knows that building a winning team requires a cultural shift driven by the drivers just as much as the executives. He needs to provide absolutely rigorous correlation data between the simulator and the physical track to help Milner and Harmon actually fix the pipeline.
He has recognized the desperation, and he's just leaning right into it.
He has to.
And the desperation really peaked for me at Suzuka. Williams made the decision to completely sacrifice Alex Albon's race. I mean, they treated a live competitive Grand Prix like a free practice session.
It was painful to watch.
They were constantly pitting him not for strategic undercuts, but just to change front wing angles. The mechanics were physically slathering fluorescent green Flovies paint onto the FW48 during live pit stops.
just to check the aerodynamic flow over the bodywork mid-race.
Doing that during a race while your competitors are boxing for fresh rubber to secure points is the ultimate operational capitulation.
It really is a public admission that you have zero faith in your current aerodynamic package,
Yeah.
and that your wind tunnel correlation is entirely broken.
They were spraying Flovies to see if the computer data was lying to them.
Exactly. They know they aren't fighting for the championship right now. They're fighting to understand their own basic physics.
And they have a desperately tight window to figure it out. Right now, the sport is in an unusual 5-week break caused by the conflict in the Persian Gulf. And James Vowles has slammed the emergency reset button.
They desperately needed this break.
They did. He is demanding a massive step forward for the upcoming race in Miami. The immediate goal is to shed a significant chunk of that weight, bring the first correlated aerodynamic upgrades, and drag Carlos Sainz out of Q1 elimination danger.
Vowles is aiming for consistent performance by the August break. He sees the midfield as incredibly tight, and he believes if they can just hit the FW48's baseline potential, they can actually leapfrog the lower-tier teams.
But the stakes couldn't be higher here. Vowles is operating on a rapidly ticking timer.
The pressure is immense. Williams brought in massive sponsors based on a promise of revival. They secured top-tier talent in Carlos Sainz. And don't forget, Alex Albon's contract is up at the end of this year.
Oh, that's right.
If they don't start delivering functional cars and regular points, the immense credit Vowles has built up with the board, the sponsors, and the drivers will just evaporate. The entire project could collapse under its own weight, both literally and figuratively.
So let's step back and look at the absolute mountain Williams has to climb right now. They have to physically carve 26 kilograms out of a completed chassis. They have to violently tear down a decade-old Excel-based manufacturing culture.
Yep.
They must integrate heavy-hitting engineers like Dan Milner to bridge the gap between digital design and physical layups. And on top of all that, they are relying on the sheer willpower and 247 dedication of Carlos Sainz to hold the psychological fabric of the team together.
It's a staggering to-do list. The core takeaway for anyone observing this situation, whether you are a motorsport fan or a business leader, is clear. Foundational systems dictate your ceiling.
Absolutely.
No matter how much top-level talent you hire, no matter how brilliant your aerodynamic concepts look on a screen, if your foundational, everyday operational systems are broken, you simply cannot execute at the highest level.
It always comes down to the foundation. And, there is a deeply provocative piece of historical precedent that really frames what Williams is truly up against here.
Oh yeah, this is a great comparison.
Years ago, the legendary F1 designer Adrian Newey, who is arguably the greatest aerodynamicist in the history of the sport, joined the Jaguar team.
Right?
And when he arrived, he encountered what he described as a stubborn British engineering superiority complex.
An arrogance of legacy.
Exactly. The attitude was essentially, we are English, we invented this sport, we inherently know how to build the best cars, so don't come in here and try to change our processes.
An organization becomes so convinced of its historical importance that it views modern operational changes as an insult rather than a necessity.
And Newey realized instantly that he couldn't just design a fast car. He had to ruthlessly clear out the bad apples, the personnel clinging to that outdated arrogance, to build the foundational culture that eventually transformed into the unstoppable Red Bull racing dynasty.
It took a total cultural purge.
It did, which leaves us with this final question for you to mull over. Is Williams secretly suffering from that exact same outdated legacy arrogance? And will James Vowles and Dan Milner have the ruthless courage to finally purge that culture before the entire 2026 season and maybe the team's future is lost?